everyone, and welcome along to this webinar where we are joined by the gentleman who is probably the UK's foremost authority on LHA and universal credit. And joining me from Bonnie, Scotland is Bill Irvine. And Bill, lovely to see you and hope you're keeping well. And we've actually got so much to talk about, haven't we? Because well, let's roll back about six weeks or so when the government measures came in and we had lockdown. It created an unprecedented rush on universal credit and LHA. So could you kind of give us an overview of what's been happening?
Yeah, and good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, it's been hectic over the last 3 or 4 weeks in particular. DWP, between the 16th of March and I think the end of March, had an additional 1.8 million claims submitted for universal credit. As well as that, they had 700,000 advance claims made for the one-off payments for people who couldn't wait the 5 weeks. And I'm somebody who often is critical of the DWP, but on this occasion, all I can do is applaud them for the efforts they've made, because they immediately redeployed 10,000 staff to assist the universal credit staff in the front line. And by doing so, it would appear from Mr. Cowling's quote the other day there that 93% of all these claims have actually been processed within the 5-week timescale. And because of that, a lot of people who would otherwise have struggled with no money whatsoever have actually had universal credit as a kind of lifeline. And saying that, however, that he also in the same week said, that we need to warn you that some of you are going to expect probably more from universal credit than you're actually going to receive. And the reason why he said that was because a lot of these people were receiving wages near the end of March, for the work they'd previously done. And I don't think many of them actually appreciated that those earnings that they received in many instances would substantially reduce or cancel out any potential entitlement they had to that award. And that's the knock-on effect on landlords as well, because they were anticipating that their tenants were going to get universal credit. In some cases, they actually assisted them make the claim, only to find out they get a zero entitlement, or they get £200 entitlement, where their rent may be £1,000 in itself, never mind the maintenance award. So I think some would have been pretty much disappointed by the award. But overall, I mean, you can't fault DWP for their efforts in that regard.
No, it's incredible that they've trained so many extra staff and got them in place so quickly. Bill, we know that the LHA and universal credit reverted from local authorities to the DWP a few years ago. Do you think that the DWP was in a much better position to cope with the scale of this crisis than if it had remained in the hands of local authority?
I think it did, because the two benefits being together, they were able to assess it as one claim. And I think the other thing they did as well, they applied a great deal of flexibility. There was no need for people to go in for an interview. Many of the statements that were made were actually accepted at face value, whereas normally there would be a number of checks and balances. In some cases with people who had a second home, where that would ordinarily been taken into account as capital, I think some of the staff were actually treating that capital as nil, because realistically that person couldn't realise at the point of claim the value of that second property as well. So I definitely think the DWP were in a better position to pay the maintenance and also the housing costs. And it was done digitally as well, remember, it was done online.
Yeah.
And I think some people actually, having criticised this benefit for quite a number of years, I think, as DWP themselves have said, it would have been so much more difficult to achieve this volume of claims processing and payments. I mean, if you think about it, it was the value, the amount of benefits that was actually paid out was incredible. The volume of claims was 10 times the norm. And they took all these staff and, as I say, redeployed them. The downside to that was, that a lot of the normal routine tasks had to be omitted.
Mm.
A lot of the landlords, anticipating they were going to get an APA, an alternative payment arrangement where the direct payments were made to them. Those haven't actually been processed properly, or the claims have been refused. I had a landlord the other day there who had 6 claims refused, and I pursued it with the practice manager, or I drafted a letter on his behalf to the practice manager, who immediately called him to be, again, as another example of how the practice managers or district managers, some of them working well over their normal hours, have been phoning some of my clients to actually say to them, look, let's see if we can help you. And in that instance, the practice manager actually sorted those cases out. But they should never have been cancelled in the first place. Now, I expect it was because they were using inexperienced staff, or they were simply refusing the claims because they knew that to actually do the processing, it would involve manual intervention, and that's what they're trying to avoid at all costs, is the manual intervention. A lot of these, 1.8 million claims, the calls have been made outbound, so the staff themselves have been phoning the claimants and actually asking them over the phone, to identify themselves and asking a number of questions that helped them to validate who that person was and what incomes they had. So, over a relatively short period of time, they had to change their practices entirely. But to their credit, it seems to have worked really well.
Well, I have to say, let's say thank you to the staff at the DWP for all their efforts, and actually doing so much good work in such a short space of time under extremely challenging conditions. So we do thank them for what they've done during this crisis period. I think, Bill, playing devil's advocate, I have to say that I think the government communication, certainly in the beginning, was actually quite poor, and it did cause a lot of confusion. For instance, we had talk of landlords having these so-called mortgage payment holidays, which kind of galvanised tenant unions and tenant action groups and charities to start saying, oh, well, actually just stop paying the rent to your landlord, they're getting a holiday. I do understand that it's incredibly challenging circumstances, but I think that, the public communications have to be really, really clear to avoid these kind of the problems. And the good thing is, I'm sure you'll agree with me, that when these problems have been identified, the government have been quite quick to come back and give further clarification and try and resolve any of this confusion. What's your view on how they've communicated?
Yeah, well, I think the measures they introduced were introduced hurriedly to address this crisis we're dealing with, and we have to accept that when you do that thing hurriedly, sometimes mistakes are made. I think the biggest fault was this idea of a mortgage holiday, and 3 months. And people latched onto that. In some cases, it was actually the claimants who latched onto it and said, well, look, you're getting a 3 months holiday, so I've got a 3 months holiday for paying rent. When in fact, the government's advice on that topic was that if you were on housing benefit, or if you were on universal credit and you were receiving housing costs that were designed to either reduce or extinguish the rent liability, there was no reason why you shouldn't actually pay it. But a lot of opportunists, let's call them, actually saw that as a weakness, and they said, well, no, that the government said that you get a 3 month holiday, so I'm going to have one as well. So there was landlords pulling their hair out over this. And I think the new NRLA, the merger of the RLA and the NLA, I think that was helpful as well, because they immediately got on to their government contacts to try and clarify that. And they did a few times. They actually came out and reminded tenants, you still have got the responsibility actually to pay your rent during this time. There was also issues to do with students as well. And again, many of them were being told, look, we're still paying you the maintenance grants or whatever the money they were receiving, they were getting, and that would continue to be paid to them. So again, landlords were getting back to them. I responded to quite a lot of the forum queries, either on the RLA website or Property 118 or Property Tribes. And a lot of them were very much the same. They were all saying that tenants had contacted them and said, we don't have any money, when really the tenants' income had actually went up. In most cases, the tenants were getting paid £1,040 extra during the course of the year. So their income was going up in many instances, roughly by about £100, £90 a month. And as well as that, in many cases, the LHA rate which had been frozen for 4 years, that was lifted as well. And it meant that many of them that had previously been paying shortfalls, between the LHA rate and the contractual rent, that shortfall was actually closed by the new 30 percentile, but they were still maintaining we can't afford, but in fact they were better off both from the increase in their benefit and also having less to pay by way of rent. So in many cases there was no excuse for that. Where the problems did arise was the people who were being furloughed. The people who had been working had never really experienced, claiming universal credit before, had never had to rely on housing benefit or universal credit. And in those cases, as I said earlier on, many of them actually received small amounts of money from universal credit to top up the money they got in March, but many of them anticipated much more than that. So I think they were genuinely struggling. And what we did in that case was we developed some standard letters that landlords could then write to their tenants who had approached them and said, look, I really need some time to pay you. And most of the landlords who acted responsibly at that point by actually writing to their tenants, engaging with their tenants, usually got a positive reaction from them.
Yeah.
There were some landlords, I have to say, in the minority, thankfully, who took the view, well, that's not my problem. The contractual rent is what I'm expecting, and that's what I'll be pursuing. But to take that type of line, I think this was too harsh, given all the things that were happening around both the landlords and the tenants and the government's actions as well. I think the landlords that were reasonable and the tenants that were reasonable will end up, at the end of the day, avoiding the need for recovery action and all the costs associated with that.
No, I think that's a very good point, and I think it highlights how important it is to nurture the landlord-tenant relationship, and those people that have done that will probably find it a lot easier to get through this very, very challenging period than those that don't.
One of the other things, Vanessa, that actually comes out in this is that the government is now apparently going to introduce pre-action protocols and pre-action, as in Scotland, pre-action requirements for private landlords. And the gist of that is that you have to engage with your tenants. You have to actually say, I want to help you, and make sure they're actually claiming the right benefits, and that you do all you can to avoid the need for the recovery action and serving notice on them, serving Section 21, Section 8, etc. And what you really need to do, because I used to be on the other side of the fence as a head of housing with 40,000 tenancies, and pre-action requirements, and I used to tutor for the Institute Housing on rent arrears and all of that. And these pre-action requirements and protocols really have to be adhered to. The good thing about them is if the landlord does adhere to that, records the various exchanges with the landlord and is seen to be acting reasonably, then if it does go to court, the courts will actually more than likely take a more sympathetic view to the landlord's position. On the other hand, if they take the hard line, the courts might take a very different view. So that seems to be something that's going to be built into the private sector rent arrears recovery process for the future.
That's very interesting, Bill. And of course, the Property Redress Scheme have launched their tenant and landlord mediation service to try and assist during this difficult time, when obviously we know you can't serve notice anyway it's the 3-month period now, and obviously there's going to be a massive backlog in the courts when things do start to come back online. So yes, I think this actually could be one of the positive things that come out of.
Well, that's my experience. My experience was when our staff engaged with the tenants, they were able to negotiate these repayment arrangements, and we therefore avoided the need to go to court. In fact, as a council, we were actually awarded the best performers in rent arrears because of our actions in this respect. And a lot of people landlords will say to me sometimes, well, we don't have the time to do that. We don't have the time or the resources to do that. But if you pursue rent arrears, that involves resources, it involves costs, and what I find is dealing with it at the front end will probably benefit you down the line, because you'll not have as high rent arrears, you'll not have the need to go to court. And I think going to court just now probably costs about £2,000 or £3,000 a case at the very least. And a lot of the times when you go to court as well, or you serve notice on an individual, they then just avoid contact. And you then have to wait for the courts to deal with it. Now, the way the courts are just now, and with this delay that's been built into this, it could be a year down the line. And we see these programmes, the one that Paul Champini is involved in presenting, where landlords wait a year or longer to actually have their day in court to get their property back. That's the last thing you want to avoid. So. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, Bill, you mentioned earlier about tenants that had never had to engage with the LHA UC system before. But of course, this crisis has resulted in landlords who had, probably young professionals, career tenants. They've lost their jobs or are struggling. Those landlords who never expected to likely come across this demographic of tenant, they've had to engage with the DWP and try and support their tenants in claiming their benefits. So this is an area that you've seen a massive amount of in the last few weeks, and you've been helping landlords understand how to move forwards, helping their tenants and so on. Bill, I can only see that this is going to it's not going to end when lockdown is eased. It's actually probably going to escalate further, because there's a lot of people that are currently furloughed who don't know yet that they don't have a job to go back to. So I think we're going to see a lot of redundancies, and there will also be people that are still in the vulnerable category with age or underlying health issues who won't be able to, go back to work either. So I think it's a moment in time when all landlords should make it their business to start getting some insights into how the whole system works.
You may remember the first time you and I got together for an interview, we actually discussed this very topic, because a lot of landlords out there will say, well, we'll never actually take anybody on LHA or universal credit. And we said at the time, but you never know what's around the corner. And if you
so right, yeah.
When you take what happened up in Aberdeen, for example, with the oil, where Aberdeen was really quite a rich city, and there was nobody really claiming benefits up there. I mean, the average housing benefit is about 60% in most areas. Up there, it was about 20%. The oil hits, and bang, the benefit rates go up. So a lot of these landlords now that thought themselves, I'm not going to have any of these tenants, are now finding they have. My phone starts, I go out a walk every morning for a couple of hours with my wife, and as I walk, my phone starts ringing, probably about 8 o'clock, and it continues to ring some nights until about 10:30. And most are landlords who, for the first time, have found themselves in this situation. Mm-hmm. And they're all applying to have the money paid directly to them. And they want to know basic things like, where do I get the form? How do I complete it? What do they ask? They're asking about reference. What reference? Very simple things. Now, the experienced housing benefit or LHA landlord knows all this, so they can actually fill them in without too much difficulty. But it's the bread and butter stuff that they don't even know. And we've been saying to them for long enough, educate yourself just in case this type of thing happens. Nobody could envisage anything like this. Mm-hmm. But the number of people who have been affected by this, not just now, as you quite rightly say, long term, unfortunately, I think the service industries, many of them are going to be absolutely over the next 2 years, I would reckon it will take for them to really get back. There's many of these different services that won't be able to do any work for the next year, I suspect. And a lot of these individuals are going to have to rely on universal credit. And it's really in the landlord's interest to help their tenants access it and make sure they get them paid at the right rate. Because if they do, they're more likely to then get their rent paid to them. And if there's any tenants who get the money and misuse that money, then if they know the way the system operates, they can apply to have the money paid directly to them using this alternative payment arrangement.
Yeah, the APA. Yeah.
These are all terms that the other landlords are aware of. These are now things that they really have to get themselves educated on ASAP.
Yeah, it's like learning a whole new vocabulary, isn't it? So
Absolutely,
your website has a huge amount of resources for landlords, and you've also very kindly produced a resource that we are going to drop a link to underneath this video, where you've dealt with some of the key issues facing landlords during this very difficult period. So as I say, there will be a link underneath this video. You mentioned also, Bill, what has been interesting actually is that the LHA rates actually were increased, in some cases up to 20 to 30% in certain areas because of this crisis. And, you know, it's very important that landlords and indeed tenants understand what they're entitled to, and be able to access those funds as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were actually complaining earlier on in the year that the government was originally going to increase the rates by 1.7%, having actually left them frozen for a period of 4 years. But then out of the blue, just 2 weeks before April, we received this notification that they were going to increase the LHA rates to the 30th percentile. And as you quite rightly say, some of the rents in some cases were going up by as much as 20, 30%, because the rents in those areas, many of the high rental areas, had went up significantly. The norm, I think, was more likely to be around about 10%. And if you consider over 4 years, that's not an unreasonable amount of money to have as an increase. And most of these landlords were contacting me and the RLA and others and asking them, well, how do we actually do this? Well, in most cases, what you need to do, first of all, is serve a Section 13 notice that you're going to issue, increase the rent that you're actually charging. So many of them actually had issued one in January based on the 1.7 figure. So they were going to raise it up to that figure. But then when this new one came out, many of them have issued a second one. Now, one of the issues that arises from that is that you're not really supposed to raise rents twice within a year. And now, these circumstances were completely unforeseen. There has to be something that can cover that scenario. Some councils have already started to question whether they can actually now pay the 30th percentile, because these notices originally were issued on the 1.7%. And now some of the landlords are asking for figures well in excess of that. But really what the landlords were looking for was the LHA rate. And the new rates are just the LHA rate, but paid at the 30th percentile. So that's an issue, that's an anomaly that's arisen in the last week or so. Another thing that's happened with that is that in the high rental areas, particularly London, if you're a single person in London, many of them end up where the money's paid to the landlord. The increase was given to the landlord, resulting in the individual getting nothing at all to live off. Nothing. Wow. In many cases. And in the case of couples where they had maybe a couple of kids, where they were living in, let's say, a 2-bed property in London, where maybe the rent was, say, £1,600 or something like that, or £1,300. When you add their LHA rate to their personal allowance, and you then apply the benefits cap, that's what I should have said in the first case. It was the benefits cap that kicked in.
Yep.
Benefit cap in both cases, they had the effect, because that wasn't increased, had the effect of leaving the tenant with nothing at all. Now, where the tenant got the money paid to themselves, then they got the increased award, but it was actually capped again. So they, in order to pay their landlord the rent, would have to use some of their personal allowance that's not designed for that purpose. It's designed to buy food and pay for, the electricity bills, the gas bills, and all of that. So this is another anomaly. The benefits cap definitely has impacted greatly on these areas, much more so than ever before. And I wrote to DWP about this very thing last year because of the concerns that some of my landlords had raised. They were concerned themselves that their tenants were getting amounts of money, like £45 a month to live off. And we raised these things hoping that they would come up with a resolution to that. They didn't. They promised they would. They took it away and never come back to us. And here it is back again. And this time it's actually worse than what it is. So we really need ministers to start looking at this overall benefits cap, to take account of the COVID situation, even if they only do it for the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever, to go over this hump that we've got just now. But at the moment, people are actually being crucified in these large, high rental areas, and there's something needs to be done ASAP on that.
Mm.
Um,
Well, again, maybe this might be one of the positive things that comes out of this, is that these kind of issues or flaws in the system are highlighted, and that when there's time, that these issues can be given some priority. But it's very interesting to hear everything you're saying, and I'm so glad we've got you, Bill, as a resource to interpret all of this for us, because I don't have any tenants in receipt of housing benefit myself at the moment. I'm very fortunate, actually. I've only had one tenant that didn't pay, said they couldn't pay at all during lockdown, and that they wanted a rent freeze until lockdown ended. Obviously, I couldn't agree to that because I didn't know when lockdown was going to end.
yeah.
And I took the government guidance, and I wrote them an empathetic letter saying that I understood that they were struggling, and I offered them a 50% decrease in the rent for May and June, and then we would review it after that, and they would agree to a payment plan to get their tenancy back on track when things are a bit more stable. And unfortunately, they agreed to that, and I think it just goes back to what you said earlier about the importance of landlord and tenant relationships, how valuable they are anyway in everyday life, but when we're all in a crisis situation, then we can work together much, much better. I think, Bill, one of the main things is this APA. Landlords may have many reasons why they need to have the housing element paid direct to them. I think that's one of the crucial things that landlords need to understand. Can you give us a very quick overview of that?
Well, there is some good news on that front, because the system as it is just now is not fit for purpose. The UC47s themselves, they've got a habit of being deleted or not being dealt with properly. And part of that is because the DWP view our email as unsecure. So you're not entitled to, you're not able to attach documents to that. If you're clever and you know how to best do it, like my daughter who does this for some of my landlord clients, there's things you can do to go over some of those hurdles. But many of these UC47s don't produce the goods, or where they do produce the goods, then somewhere down the line, DWP all of a sudden stops making a payment. And it's usually because the tenant has approached DWP and said, look, I think I should now have the money paid back directly to us. Now, if and when that happens, what DWP should do, like they do with housing benefit, is they should suspend payment. They should contact the landlord and say, we've been approached by your tenant to have the money redirected. What do you think? But they're not doing that. What they're doing sometimes, on a whim, giving the money back to the tenant, who gets the money in many instances and misuses it, putting himself in arrears, putting the tenancy in jeopardy, and sometimes if there's family, young kids involved, putting the whole family in jeopardy as well. Now, a number of my clients, DWP approached me 18 months or so ago and asked me to identify a number of my clients who were dealing with LHA and UC and maybe higher numbers. So they've been piloting a new online system to replace the UC47s. That was supposed to go live at the end of last year, but for a variety of reasons hasn't. But I'm now told that it's likely to go live sometime in the next few months. Now that will make a tremendous difference, because my clients that are using it are now getting responses to their applications, and invariably every application they get results in a payment. So for the future, that's definitely something that will improve the landlord's lot. But there's still a lot of things that DWP should be doing. They overuse a thing called explicit consent. They basically say that explicit consent is required in so many different scenarios.
Yeah.
And in fact, with APAs, there should be no need for explicit consent. In fact, they now acknowledge that the landlord doesn't have to give consent. All they do is they contact the tenant and say, your landlord's applied to have the money redirected. What have you got to say? But if they can't produce any evidence to counter what the landlord's saying, the DWP should actually pay them the money. And invariably, they actually do that. But the landlords themselves don't have a lot of trust in the UC47 forms. As I mentioned earlier on, one of my landlords this week, 6 of them. And you think about it, 6 monthly rents missed for maybe a month or even 2 or 3 months, that's a big loss to the landlords. I've actually been pursuing compensation in a lot of these cases where landlords lost out. And we took some of these cases through the internal process of DWP's complaints process. And then we then took them to what they call the independent case examiner, who is a Miss Joanna Wallace. She's an American solicitor or lawyer, and she runs this similar to the kind of ombudsman service. However, it's similar but not as good. It's not as independent or impartial as far as I'm concerned. If you look at their website or you look at their email address, it's ICE Independent Case Examiner at dwp.gov.uk. They're funded by DWP. So we took these cases, and so far we've had 8 that have resulted in an outcome where they've upheld our complaints of maladministration. So they've acknowledged that DWP have made not just one mistake, but a series of mistakes in each individual application. But they offered nothing by way of compensation. If I was taking a housing benefit complaint to the local government ombudsman, that's the process there. The local government ombudsman takes a different view. He says that, or she says that, if the landlord loses out because of some maladministration by the council, then the council should pay compensation. And some of the upper tier judges, Judge Edward Jacobs and a number of others, they say exactly the same. So this independent case examiner's decision is at completely at odds with all the other precedents that are out there. Yeah. And so we're now taking the first of the 3 cases that we got an outcome to the Parliamentary Commissioner, which is the last part of these complaints processes, in the hope that the Parliamentary Commissioner will overrule the independent case examiner. The explanation given by Ms Wallace was that the landlord really needs to take their tenant to court. Now, in many of these cases, it's an ex-tenant who's on benefits. The chances, even if they took them to court and get an order for recovery of the debt, the chances of actually recouping that debt is nil. So it's a classic example of throwing good money after bad. So that's a problem in the system as well, we need to address. One of the silver linings, I think, of all of this is what we are now doing. And a lot of my landlord clients, we are now having these meetings over the internet, and we're able to talk to each other about things. And this type of system that we're using as well, you can actually let them see examples and a variety of others. And I know that the NRLA, easy for me to say, I know that they are now doing a lot of these webinars and things like that. And I would encourage landlords, particularly those that have never experienced this before, to get themselves involved. Many of them are free, these ones with the different organisations. And I would encourage them to do that and get themselves educated, just like we said 3 or 4 years ago to them. Because for the next 2 or 3 years, the more they know about this universal credit and all the other nuances about it, then the more likely they'll save themselves money. To sit back and do nothing, they will lose money. Absolutely no doubts about it.
No, you're absolutely right. And we will drop a link to the NRLA webinar series underneath this video as well. I totally agree with you, Bill, that this is a time for landlords to understand that, you know, when lockdown eases, this isn't going to be, all rents are going to suddenly start back up again and everything's going to go back to normal. It's not. It's only my opinion, of course. I don't know if you agree, but I think there will be very, very significant fallout, and we will see the continuation of large numbers of people needing to go on to LHA and UC moving forwards. You know, and we don't know how long that will last, but certainly, as you rightly say, education is absolutely vital. There are many, many resources out there, including your website, which we'll link to. You've produced this document to help landlords during this difficult time. And we've got the NRLA as well, as you say, and lots of, you know, very helpful support on the forums from landlords that are experienced with this issue, helping those that aren't. So we do need to say, landlords, you're not alone. There are places to reach out for help. And Bill is available as well with his consultancy work and his resources. So I think, Bill, what's interesting is that we've seen the best and the worst of the whole system during the last few weeks, which is often the case in any crisis. Hopefully, as you say, there will be some positive things to come out from it that have highlighted the weak links and so on. As we round this up, really, what do you think the key things that landlords need to be aware of about LHA or UC as we move forward into the next phase of the recovery of this horrendous crisis?
I think first and foremost, if the tenant has been furloughed or self-employed, and that's a group that I think are expecting great things in June by way of a grant, but many of them won't get anything because it's based on the median profit that they had over the last financial year, the 2 years or the 3 years. And my experience of dealing with self-employed with housing benefit many years ago, I don't think many of them will actually qualify, certainly for the £2,500, which is the kind of maximum level. So many of these people in the short term, at the very least, will have to apply for universal credit. So it's important that landlords, first of all, educate themselves and do their best to assist their tenants through that process, because many of them, some of these DWP staff were saying in blogs the other day there that they're actually taking claims from people who had six-figure salaries and who this was the last thing they were ever expecting, but they're now having to take them through step by step the actual process of claiming. And there's a lot of them who, we worry about getting the virus, but there's a lot of people out there as well who every day are living with that threat, but they're also worried about how will I pay my bills, how will I pay my mortgage or rent or whatever. And a lot of these people are very genuine. The majority of landlords, I think, accept that. So it's important to do their best to help them through the process. The other good thing is that the DWP definitely have changed a lot of things and are acting, I think, very responsibly in the way they're dealing with things. They're maybe using a lot more discretion than they previously did. And I think they've been guided by the ministers in that respect. But that will not go on I don't think that will go on for too long. I think the more people actually put their claims in, validate them and go through the process, and then know how to challenge bad decisions as well, because there are a lot of bad decisions made in the course of this, especially when you're dealing with staff who are not routinely dealing with universal credit.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think they should engage with their tenants where rent arrears are accruing and try and come up with a sensible repayment system, and hopefully the tenant will adhere to that. But it's something they should really keep a record of, so that if this pre-action protocol or pre-action requirements in Scotland is applied, I think it will be, then they have got something to validate that they have made those attempts, because the courts will take a view of that, I'm sure, once all of these cases start to go through the process of going through the courts.
Fantastic. I think these are very stressful times for everyone, and I think we've got to use common sense, we've got to use empathy, and we've got to understand that people that we're dealing with may be very, very stressed and under pressure, and we've got to make allowances for that as well, I think, on a just a human level.
I know from speaking to some of the staff in the advice line of the NRLA, they have been inundated as well with a lot of these inquiries, and they've created a lot of standard letters which their members can actually attach. And if you actually are thinking of getting a membership of anything, I would say get yourself associated with the likes of the NRLA or ARLA or one of these other organisations, because they produce this information. If you consider how much you pay for it for a year, in most cases it's well less than a week's rent. And there's, in the case of the NRLA, you've got these advice staff. And my experience of dealing with them and speaking to some other people that contact me about universal credit is that the advice they give is actually very high quality, because many of them are landlords themselves and have been doing it for quite some time. Many of them as well come along the courses that are run for the NRLA. So many of them have got a basic understanding of the universal credit scheme. but they also refer cases, the more difficult cases or the more problematic cases, one of which just a few weeks ago there involved 45,000 overpayment, and I got it quashed. So they'll deal with the bread and butter stuff, but there's also a referral sometimes to the likes of myself to deal with the more complex things. And again, I think overall there's a good services there to tap into. There's the various forums. Your own forum, Property Tribes, is a good one, where landlords help each other to get through these problems. And I would again encourage people to participate in that dialogue.
Absolutely. Well, I'm pleased to be able to say that Property Tribes has a 25% discount off NRLA membership. It's typically, I think I'm right in saying, around £75, but you can get a discount off using the link that I can supply beneath the video if you'd like to claim your 25% discount. And as Bill has stated, they do have some incredible resources. They've got their own coronavirus support hub, as we have here at propertytribes.com. And also, Bill, I think the NLA have done a very good job in communicating with government about the issues facing landlords on the ground at the coalface, and the more members they have, the more powerful their voice can be in the corridors at Westminster. So this is a very, very good time for multiple reasons to join a landlord association, and we are both affiliated with the NRLA, which is obviously the biggest in the UK. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time, Bill, and for everything that you've been doing to support landlords through this difficult time. And you are on hand on Property Tribes to answer any questions. You've provided some fantastic resources. You gave us the updated LHA UC rates that landlords needed to be aware of as soon as they came out. This kind of information it could be the difference between surviving and failing. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing, and it's so good to know that you are on the end of a phone and that you have the support services that you do in what I do think is quite a complex area.
Yeah, it is. But I've been doing it. It's like one of my clients said to me, he says, if I need a plumber, I get a plumber in to do the plumbing. If I get a problem with woodwork, I get myself a joiner. He said, anything you do with benefits, I call you. Because it is, there's no doubt about it, it's a complex topic. But the more you know about the bread and butter, you don't need to know everything about it. The more you know about the bread and butter issues. And that's where you'll get that from these forums, from the training that NRLA does. And I mean, I've been doing more and more of these kind of consultations, maybe an hour at a time. I wouldn't recommend anything any longer than that because it'll put you to sleep, a lot of this stuff. But I think that will be the future because a lot of these training sessions I used to do, I would do it from 10 o'clock in the morning to maybe about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to adapt because of this crisis to this type of communication. And it does work, I mean, because I'm a novice at it, but the experienced people who are doing it, and I've done it a couple of times now, actually showing slides and a variety of other things, showing the LHA rates, where in the LHA rate table, their rent would be. And so there's a lot of things you can actually do that in the past I would never have thought about. But this definitely, I think, is the future. And a lot of the times as well, it's much cheaper. I mean, if I went down to London to do this, there's, I travel down usually by train, I stay overnight, beforehand. So all of that is a cost, to the client in most cases. But doing it this way, it's much, much more affordable. And when you were saying there about the NRLA membership, I mean, goodness me, 75 quid or 80 quid for a year, I think it is. You're not going to get much better buy than that if you're especially if you're invested in this area. Yeah.
And it's tax deductible. So on that note, Bill, we'll say thank you very much for your time to take part in this webinar with us today. We really do appreciate it. And to our viewers who've been watching, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for staying with us. We hope you have got benefit from this fairly wide-ranging discussion. But obviously you may have questions as a result of this, and we do invite you to either drop them below on propertytribes.com on our discussion, question, or if you feel that you need extra support, then please do get in touch with Bill, and we will put his contact details next to this video as well. So all that remains for me to say, Bill, is thank you for everything that you do. Don't go changing. And I hope that, you maintain your health, and moving forwards, that we can start to see, the situation easing a little bit for everybody, because it's certainly been very interesting times.
Certainly is, and everybody keep safe, keep well, and keep the up distance.
Absolutely. All right, Bill, all the best to you, and thank you. And thanks to everybody for watching. We're signing off now from Guildford, and also up there in beautiful Scotland. So thanks for watching.
Cheers.